Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks very much for joining us. This is the first GSA event of 2021, so my first opportunity to wish you all a very happy new year. Interesting start, obviously, already to 2021. So my name is Kerry Hallard. I'm the Chief Exec of the Global Sourcing Association, and I am joined by the subject matter experts. So with me today, I have got, in the order I can see you on the screen, so I've got Paul Gardner, who is Chairman at Peru Consulting.
Peru Consulting.
Thank you. And I have got Coas Consulting, so it's not a big faux pas. And I've got James Cockroft from Coas Consulting. And we've also got Shivendra Singh, who is with NASCOM. I'm going to get the gentlemen to give you a brief intro to themselves shortly, but I'm just going to steal the limelight for 1 second and just give you a quick overview of what we've got coming down the line at the GSA in the next couple of weeks. So this is our first event roundtable on the subject of supplier diversity and how to create the best practice for having a diverse supply chain. So anybody interested in that subject, please do get in touch with me. And then the next event we've got is on the 20th of January. And that's an event looking at impact sourcing, and that's being brought to you by the Global Technology and Business Services Council. So we've got speakers from absolute impact sourcing experts from all around the world speaking at that event. So, so those events, before we launch into the world's first 6 weeks.
Kerry, you're breaking up.
And runs in.
I don't know if
that kicks off.
So you're breaking up quite badly. We're not hearing you. Do you want to?
You got me now.
Yeah, turn your camera off. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So, and what I'm saying is we've then got the world's first festival of sourcing, which is 40 events and 1 festival, which is kicking off on the 9th of February and running through to the end of March. So just wanted to give you the heads up of what we've got coming down the line at the GSA. Right, so Brexit. That's obviously what this webinar is all about. I'm going to ask each of the speakers to give their view of what they've experienced so far in Brexit and their opinions on the challenges we've got coming forward. But we really want this to be a really useful session for you. So please do put as many questions as you have. Questions and putting them to our subject matter experts. So so please do use the chat and the Q&A. So the day before the referendum, we had the GSA symposium, and we put it to the 250 people we had in the room. Are you leave or remain? And 87% of our community were very clearly we wanted to remain. So obviously when the vote came to leave, it was a shock, and I think the whole industry was really disappointed. But what has actually been the repercussions? So I'd now like, and I'm just going from the order I can see you on my screen. I'm going to ask Paul, could you quickly introduce yourself and give your view of the impact of Brexit so far, perhaps with some anecdotes of the sort of work that you've been doing with your clients?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So, yeah, Paul Gardner from Peru Consulting. We're just very briefly, we're IT transformation specialists. We've got about 40 experts in areas like sourcing, telecoms, cloud services, data, RPA, and delivering change programs for international and global clients and the UK public sector. So just to give you an idea where we're coming from, I guess turning to Brexit, I guess my view is it was very much a political and emotional decision, not a rational economic one. So I probably just look at it in those 2 ways. I guess, we're clearly, from a political and emotional viewpoint, we're clearly no longer part of the European club. And it's bound to have a negative impact as European companies, are less likely, or an international company is going to be less likely to invest in the UK moving forward. And obviously has a psychological impact on individuals who are going to be less likely, I expect, to work or settle in the UK in the future. Although I have to say we haven't actually seen any mass exodus of Europeans up to now. So I think GB will just be seen as a slightly less welcoming and enticing place to live. So that's, I guess, on the political front and emotional front. Economically, it's kind of interesting to note that GB services industry represents about 80% of UK output, or GB output rather, and 50% of exports, but actually got pretty scant attention in the recent agreement. But so far at the moment, we're not seeing a huge amount of change. From a sourcing and technology services industry perspective, I guess the main immediate point is if you're delivering services on the ground in Europe, you can still do it, but you're going to need to get yourself a work permit, and you're going to have to take account of individual national rules, which are made at the nation level, not the EU level, so they're going to vary. So as we do, if you have work in Austria, Austrians are quite, they think you need to prove why you need to be there and why you're better than someone they can employ locally. So that's something immediate to think about. I think probably it's going to be in the future, and when we get to the next level of detail, that we're going to see much more divergence, and therefore potential issues, kind of areas of concern could be data protection, location of data, export control, cyber, GP, taxation, etc. I'll just give you a quick example on the data side. The EU has yet to approve the adequacy of our data protection laws, and you can see already that access to EU police and security databases is going to be a little curtailed. On the other hand, we see that Google and Facebook have already announced they're going to move the legal responsibility for the data they hold from Ireland to the US. So we'll no longer, as British residents, have recourse to the EU data protection law. So the GB ICO, Information Commissioner's Office, is going to have to regulate those global giants who are no doubt going to be lobbying us or GB government for a more favourable deal on data protection, and that's going to put us in conflict with Europe. So you can kind of see that down the track there could be some quite difficult, complex areas, which is going to impact us. But it's not all gloom. We have to remember, we have a lot of advantages in GB PLC, but we've always got to make sure we're more competitive than EU and other international companies as well. So we are the world's 5th largest economy. We've got a huge amount of expertise in sourcing technology services in future growth areas that I've already mentioned, like cyber and RPA and so forth. Of course, we do speak English, which is a language of business, and there are actually a lot of bigger forces for change outside of Brexit. So we've all, as we are today, experiencing remote working. And as we know, services don't particularly recognise or respect borders, nor does technology. And also the pace of technology changes, expanding, not contracting. So huge amount of opportunity as well. But I guess 2 final points to make. We really need to make sure we maintain competitiveness, at the company level and the GB PLC level, because companies make investment decisions on economic grounds, not necessarily on emotional or political ones. So we just need to keep being competitive. And then the second main point I make is Brexit is not yet done. There's a huge amount of work to do. If you read the agreement, it's actually set up 25 specialist committees covering many things, including, for example, public procurement. So if you thought Brexit was done, I'm afraid you're going to need to think again. It's going to be with us for years. All right. So on that cheerful note, I'll probably hand back to you.
Okay, right. So I'm going to go straight over to James. Do you want to build on that? Are you seeing the same?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Kerry. Just very brief introduction then. Yeah, James Cockroft. I'm one of the directors of Coes Consulting. Just as Paul stole 30 seconds to do a bit of a sales pitch, I will do the same, if that's right, Kerry. We're Coes, are independent IT advisory firm. working across industry sectors, public services, financial services and corporates. We've around 50 consultants based across UK and Germany. Due to the independence, actually IT sourcing is one of our largest offerings, but we do also do a significant amount of work across things like strategy, transformation, business technology, architecture as well. So just the free sales pitch that I get for doing this. Thank you. So just sort of building a bit on what Paul said, that when kind of asked to be on the panel this morning, I kind of thought of three key areas really that I wanted to talk about to start with. One was what I think it means to the UK as a whole, what it means to the IT outsourcing industry, and what does it mean to Coyos as a business and other businesses like ours as well. UK as a whole, I can personally believe Brexit and the deal will be damaging to the UK and the UK economy, as it will put us at a disadvantage. And I think, as Paul said, that's only going to possibly get worse as we start to diverge services, and we can potentially see tariffs being introduced as reciprocal measures by the EU as we start to diverge from pre-agreed standards and legislation. As Paul also said, that our largest trading partner is the EU, and you can already see that it's going to be more difficult to do business there. It's really ironic that Brexit was sold on the promise of removing EU bureaucracy, when in fact we've just added a whole layer of complexity on top of that. All of these things are going to make the UK a lot less attractive to do business with. When actually I speak to a lot of our EU clients, for them Brexit isn't a massive deal. After all, we're 1/27th of the original market that we've just separated from, whereas they've still got 26 out of 27, where we've made sort of it more difficult for them. They've still got 26 out of 27 markets, which is still easy to do business with. And actually, in reality, things like COVID are far more higher up their business agendas than things like Brexit are. With regards to the IT outsourcing industry, I think at a high level, I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact upon us as an industry. And I say that on the basis of, as an industry, we're already used to sort of large multinational deals where we already have different clauses, lots of different annexes to cover different markets when it comes to things like data protection, data processing, how invoicing works, making sure that we're treating things like withholding tax, which obviously, when you look at deals outside of Europe, we're already used to doing that with the likes of the US, Mexico, Brazil, Asia, etc. We're already used to sort of putting those sorts of clauses in large outsourcing agreements. I think at the kind of the lower level, though, things like the lack of freedom of movement may have some impact upon skills availability. We already know that in the UK there is a skills shortage. We're yet to see what the final sort of point system is going to be for UK visas, etc. But I would personally imagine that IT professionals would be able to gain employment quite easily within the UK as a result of that new points-based system. I certainly know from experience of the way that visas work in Europe at the moment, IT professionals find it relatively easy to gain employment there. However, again, it's just another layer of complexity and bureaucracy that we need to deal with. However, I'm sure as an industry, we will, as always, embrace that. And in a lot of ways, we're already used to things like visa applications when it comes to things like landing of offshore resources for projects and programs as well. Personally, as a business, we're not really affected too much by it. As I already said, we have an office in Germany. We've had the office for 2 years now. It was partly a reaction to Brexit, but actually we have 30 to 40% of our business comes from EU clients, predominantly in Germany. Therefore, we can carry on servicing clients in a very similar way. The issue that we have is around that kind of freedom of movement. I think there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment of what it means. We're hoping that certainly things like the 90-day and 180-day rule will allow us still to use some UK resources on European projects. But our main focus at the moment is really building up some of the recruitment into Germany. So again, unfortunately, as a UK company, we are investing in the German market. So it's not really adding to Paul's GB PLC. So that's, I guess, me for now. Kerry, I'll hand back to yourself and look forward to answering other questions later on.
You're on mute, Kerry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I have homeschooling 2 children doing live streaming lessons, and they are stealing all of my bandwidth. So apologies that I'm hiding. And Shivendra, thank you very much, James. That's brilliant. Shiv, we invited you to join because obviously you come at this from a very different perspective. I'd be really keen to understand what India's experience of Brexit has been and what your journey has been.
Thanks very much, Kerry. And yes, I do see that probably I look at it from a slightly different perspective. Just to give you a bit of a background, I represent NASSCOM, which is the not-for-profit Software and Services Association in India. We represent Indian as well as global companies, nearly 3,000 members, with an industry revenue of nearly $191 billion. And my role is, the global part at NASSCOM. I am responsible for that, which is nearly $150 billion, which is the exports. From a UK context, we have about 17 to 18% of our exports, which is the second largest source of exports, for India. And from a British perspective, we are the second largest source of FDI into the UK, from a tech industry perspective. What I will be speaking is, going to be focused on the Indian IT industry and the presence in the UK and how I see the entire Brexit process. But before that, I just wanted to kind of, step back and look at the entire geopolitical environment that we are currently in, still during the COVID phase, as we say. There is a huge amount of protectionism around the world, which means that, the whole idea around various governments is to protect local jobs, which is very right, and get, work done locally through local employees. Now, as, Paul probably suggested that, or James, that, there is a fair amount of skills shortage in the UK, just as there is around the world. Hence, talent is probably the most important, in its most important phase that we can anyway see, and we will come to that. So what is it? What is happening around the world, and how do we put Brexit within that perspective? I think first and foremost, you're seeing the US and China decoupling of the supply chain. Looking at Huawei and its US forays, we know what those challenges are. Then there is the other set of challenges of the big tech and the EU and the UK as well, in terms of how they are going to be treated. Then the EU shot down the Privacy Shield agreement, which was there between the EU and the US as well. And then there are countries like India and Japan, and as well as EU, and how do they and Britain, and how do they work as we move forward. I think the apprehension is very, very clear. And the apprehension is that we don't want to be a source of raw data and have to pay for digital intelligence that is being created. And I think that's very, very important to look at, while Brexit unfolds and some of these things pan out, and we'll have to see how that, pans out in due course of time. As we see, the growth within the tech sector, has been driven by digital transformation, with AI-driven digital transformation strategies being the linchpin of it. And for that, data utilization is going to be most critical. And for that, a data adequacy agreement, as alluded to earlier, is going to be critical between the EU and the UK, and India and the UK, as part of Brexit, because I think this is probably going to be the most important driver of growth, as we move forward within an environment of, geopolitical protectionism. The other issue is we talk about taxes and some of the other things, but what I am seeing is geographies are being replaced by platforms, and we don't really have a global body which can look at solving such issues. WTO equivalent of for whatever it's worth, but the WTO equivalent for digital trade is not there. And I think that is going to drive a lot of movement as we move forward. Hence, trust, talent, innovation, and agility are going to drive a lot of things. And I would love to see how Brexit unfolds through some of these parameters that we move forward. Now, coming to specifically to the Indian tech industry and and the UK. I think as NASSCOM, we've been doing a lot of work just in the last 1 year. We've held a couple of tech alliance meetings, which is the formal structured tech agreement between the UK and India, part of the joint statement of both the prime ministers in April 2018. We've looked at 3 or 4 key areas and have agreed to move forward, and we have moved forward. We do appreciate, we talked about immigration, we do appreciate the nationality agnostic immigration strategy, the integration of the ICT tier 2 visas in the points-based system. There are certain challenges. And Kerry, you talked about passporting. I think that's going to drive a lot of issues forward because, the blanket access for British financial firms to the EU ends. So how does an equivalence get created? Because banking financial services industry is a key driver for growth, and both from an Indian tech as well, obviously from a UK perspective. So we'll have to see how that pans out. Things like a social security agreement, and how do we look at jointly building skills to ensure that each country has the skill set to be able to drive digital transformation, because 60-65% of the existing workforce will need to be upgraded, or upskilled in order to be able to drive some of this growth. So all of that, I think, is very, very critical as discussion points. I do see an openness in Great Britain far more than it has been in the past. We are talking about a trade agreement. At least initially, we are starting to build on that. So I'm looking forward to how technology gets integrated into that, and it's not a goods-based agreement, but also a services-based agreement. So these are a few things which I am expecting, post-Brexit now in terms of how we are able to, ensure that growth continues to happen. So I'll kind of stop here, Kerry, and look forward to the questions ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Shivendra. Okay, just quickly staying with you, Shivendra, conversation that we had yesterday, you were saying that you were finding the British government had been pretty easy to work with?
I would not say easy to work with. I would say open to work with, which means that they are open to hearing on issues. And I think there seems to be a higher degree of flexibility now with Brexit to understand and appreciate any set of challenges. As I said, in this era around the world, we have challenges on free movement of technology, data, and skilled workforce. And if we are able to sort this out, we should be able to be in a stronger position for, ease of doing business and increasing the bilateral trade from about 25 billion pounds to, to much more. So, we are definitely seeing a more receptive government.
Okay, that's a good positive message. Thank you. Okay, so we've had a question come on in looking at data. Obviously, when Brexit was first announced, I think that's one of the big issues is what's going to happen with GDPR and data centres. Would either Paul or James like to give their view on what's actually happened and what might be coming down the line in terms of data? James.
I was going to say I'm quite happy with Paul. I know Paul's done quite a bit in this area. I think when we spoke previously, Paul's probably more the data expert. I'm possibly more the sort of finance side.
Yeah, I mean, nothing has changed at the moment. as I said, the EU has not yet approved the adequacy of our data protection GDPR regime, but they are extremely similar at the moment. So there is nothing to worry about today. It's all about what's going to happen in the future, as with possible divergence. As I say, as I said in my bit at the beginning, the GB may be under pressure or want to be more liberal with, depending which way you look at it, with the rules, to basically attract your Googles and your Facebooks and more business. And then that will put us at loggerheads potentially with the EU. But nothing has changed today, and that might not happen, and we may stay, converged. Converged. So that's where we are today. So it's what could happen in the future. We can speculate. There are opposing forces. Some will put us towards convergence, some of us towards divergence. All right. So can't really answer the question today. But our experience, we know, for example, when we deal with other countries which have challenging data protection, like China, for example, we work with companies that have put in regimes. Which means that they can hold Chinese data in China. Other international global data is not held in China for the reasons that they don't want the Chinese government grabbing it. Okay, so all these different jurisdictions are around the world. There'll be examples somewhere, and those are the sort of things that we would kind of leverage if we do diverge from the EU. All right, so it's not a clear picture at the moment, I'm afraid.
Well, is it not also true that there's a 6-month, stay of execution at the moment whilst they look at the adequacy?
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, that's right. It's basically as you are for at least 6 months. Yeah. It's one of those many things. The 25 specialist committees. It's one of those many things that are left hanging for them to look at. Yeah. So we need to keep a really close eye on those sort of things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, so one of the questions I had in was really looking at supply chain and what the risks have been to supply chains. Now, obviously, if we look at what's going on in Northern Ireland, there's been some catastrophic failures in supply chains. What we should have done differently, what we've got wrong, what needs to change, and what is going to be the Northern Ireland situation. James, would you like to take that one?
Sorry, you dropped in and out slightly there again. So I probably can't speak on specifically the Northern Ireland point, but I think it's as a whole, if you want me to answer the first point, what should we have done differently? It's fairly simple. It would be not leave. There's stapling my flag clearly to the mast there. I think, yes, we've clearly seen already a number of companies across Europe that it's certainly in the short term, if not the long term, that are just finding it too difficult to do business with the UK, especially a lot of the smaller manufacturers and retailers. We've seen it with numerous different companies that have said that they're not willing to register, for example, with HMRC, because they now have to collect VAT at source rather than at the border, where we do with some other countries. I think clearly sorting some of those elements out to hopefully make it easier and less bureaucratic and less onerous on the origin, the companies actually trying to do the business, I think is one area. I think as we talked already, I think we're only really at the beginning of this road for people who think that kind of the deal that was struck on whatever the 24th of December is it, and we got Brexit done. This probably just the starting line. I think somebody put in the chat as a Swiss citizen, I absolutely concur with that. I think every single thing that we do or want to change, whether that's around data, whether it's around employment laws, around TUPE, around any of those sorts of things that we want to change, the EU will want to be back at the negotiation table, and it's that they will want to try to keep equivalence as much as possible. Obviously, as soon as you start to see things like tariffs introduced on goods and things, then again the UK is going to be potentially compromised even further. Yes, there is some hope that and promise in terms of better deals with other countries outside of the EU. But personally, thinking yes, that's going to be great for some companies, and it is an opportunity for us. However, kind of our largest trading partner is the EU. I don't know whether the combined GDP across the whole of the EU states probably is the world's largest economy if you look at it on that level. So I think it's some real challenging times in the years ahead.
Okay, thank you. Paul, did you want to add to that at all?
No, I think James covered that one very well. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Right, so one of the subjects we've been looking at is talent. Obviously, Shivendra has highlighted already that there is a huge shortage of talent in the UK. Are we shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit here? Have we created an issue? And one of the additional questions I had come on in is, what's going to happen for human rights? So thank you, Joe. You posed the question that now the Cabinet has 4 of the 5 authors of Britannia and see, human rights are not being protected in the way that they have been over the last 40 years.
Do you want me to take that last one, Kerry?
Yes, please, Paul.
All right, I'll do that. Yeah, okay. In another role, I'm an independent counsellor, so I guess I have a view on politics, an independent view. It's a very good question. I mean, what you're referring to is kind of workers' rights in particular, I expect. We've obviously got a right-wing populist government in GB, so they may intuitively want to strip away workers' rights. That's kind of what you'd expect. On the other hand, there are obviously other political forces at play. Mr. Johnson has made a big play around levelling up, and he's got the red wall of seats in the north of England, which then you need to retain to keep in power. And as we know, politicians love power, so that's their main driver normally. So there'll be a lot of tension size, but I'd also observe that they're quite busy with some other crises at the moment, which is probably the good news about the crisis. It's probably tying them up from doing particularly stupid things. So I think it's a serious point. But there are again competing forces. But I would, if you ask me from my own personal view, I think there will definitely be some attempts to chip away at workers' rights over the coming years. So watch this space, and if people don't like that, I suggest they vote for someone else.
So can I answer the first part, Kerry?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think as I mentioned, we keep on talking about the fact that the industry has pivoted very well in the during the COVID times, and in fact is playing an even more critical role during the current times. So right at the beginning, when we saw that retired doctors and nurses had to be brought into the fold within the UK, you saw the tech industry and pick up that and very quickly turned it around, whether it was the business interruption loan scheme, or whether it is maintenance of critical infrastructure, in hospitals and others. A lot of that critical work has been turned around by the tech industry, and that makes us very, very proud to be a part of this industry. I think a lot of this growth, which is being driven by digital transformation, as we say, whether it's AI, robotics, machine learning, 3D printing, IoT, cybersecurity, and many of these areas, you will see that the existing workforce is not going to do that job, and nearly 60% of the existing workforce needs to be upskilled. Now comes how do we do that, and in quick time, how do we scale up? And that's the big challenge. Typically there are 2 routes to it. One is, you look at upskilling in country, and the other is, bringing in high skilled workers, for short periods of time. Both these routes, continue to thrive around the world. We as NASSCOM, are officially, partners to our government, central government, and have launched, Future Skills Prime program over 2 years back, and now we are very well positioned to upskill nearly 2 to 3 million people in the next, by 2025, and that's the target which has been set. And we are working with companies and now with universities to do that. And we very much look forward to, forming alliances around the world in these 8 areas that I talked about and 75 job roles. To be able to do that, it's an online program, and and we need to develop that skill set. And I do agree that the British government is doing a fair bit, and we are working on the skilling side as well with them. We did a universities tour across 5 universities recently, and took a bunch of our companies to ensure that they were able to recruit people, and then they trained them over a period of time to make them employable for them. So these 2 routes are critical: develop own talent as well as bring in people if you don't have that enough talent, and for businesses to thrive, especially in an ongoing phase. Talent is going to drive a lot of this, so we must all spend time and work hard to ensure that we have that in plenty.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a key area of work that we're looking at the GSA is the whole move to open talent and the gig economy, accessing talent globally. So, okay, so what are the areas we've not discussed so far? One of the things that I heard from our members that could have been the biggest benefit of Brexit was getting out of public procurement regs. Has anything changed with regard to public procurement? James, you smiled there, so I'm going to point that question to you.
Long and short, no, certainly nothing's changed yet. I think what we see already in the UK is a micro level of what we see across Europe, and actually there are many different interpretations and routes through the system. In the UK, we've got things like OG, digital outcomes, government cloud, just to name a few different routes that organisations can use to go through some form of public procurement exercise. If you kind of blow that up to the kind of European scale, every country has really got their own way of implementing public procurement rules. So I think historically, when we've done deals across Europe, even with what we would consider to be sort of corporate organisations whereby public procurement rules wouldn't apply, for example, in the UK or Germany, certainly some of the Central and Eastern European countries, some of those do fall under public procurement rules, and we have to abide by those in those situations. But they're different from country to country, so you have to be very careful and follow what is in place in each individual country anyway, even though in theory it's kind of one umbrella process and set of guidelines. There are local implementations that are very different, and that will continue to be the case. I don't, similar to things like human rights, where obviously in the UK things like TUPE, etc., are the UK's implementation of the Acquired Rights Directive. Certainly in the short term, I don't expect any massive changes in public procurement rules. Again, there might be that chipping away, but I think it was Paul that said, I guess one benefit at the moment of having populist government is that we certainly don't see the stark contrast of political parties as we see in the US, fortunately, at the moment, and therefore some of those checks and balances do exist at the moment in the UK government. So yes, I think there will be some chipping away at things like public procurement and TUPE and other legislation that we currently signed up to that's similar to European neighbours. But I think that hopefully will be limited. And as Paul said, you kind of know what you can do in about 3 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting game. Okay. What about the whole subject?
Kerry.
Yeah. Hi,
Sorry,
Joe.
do you mind if I offer an opinion on that question as well? So I think what we've seen in the past 12 months is that the government have used emergency.
Do you just want to introduce who you are for everybody?
Sorry, yes. So I'm Joe Williams. I'm a member of the Exec Council with the Global Sourcing Association. I work for Aviva in the Central Services area running supply governance. So I think what we've seen in the last 10 to 12 months is that the government have used emergency powers under the COVID pandemic situation to actually get around the typical public procurement rules. And for me personally, I think what we've seen is that there's been a lot of, I think, cronyism, maybe the best term to describe it, in the way that the government has approached the handing out of contracts for certain things such as PPE and test, track and trace. And I guess a concern I have is that as we move into the future and we start to see the bonfire of red tape that has been promised, that we could start to see moves away from typical public procurement processes that were mandated through the EU and a move towards kind of a lot less openness. And for me personally, that would offer a real concern about the use of public funds.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Have Paul and James got any build on that or response?
No, I was going to say, I think I do agree with Joe that that it would be concerning as a UK taxpayer that kind of public funds could be misappropriated in that way, and that we don't have that openness and transparency. I have the hope that doesn't become the case for sure. But yeah, absolutely agree that it is a concern if we stepped away from these things too much.
Yeah.
Thanks. So thanks for chipping in, Joe. And if anybody else on the call wants to chip in, please put your hand up and we will invite you to participate. So we do want to make it an interactive discussion, and any questions could go in the chat box as well, please. So another big factor, I think, was we were predicting a mass exodus of financial services from the City of London. Did we see that, and what do we still see potentially coming down the line? Paul?
Probably that's more one for James, isn't it? So,
James? Yeah.
I think so far, I think estimates have been sort of 5,000 to 6,000 jobs have gone elsewhere. I think one thing that's possibly benefited the UK is that London has been such a major financial services hub globally that there's not necessarily one logical place in Europe for all that to go. Yes, you've got the likes of Frankfurt that put their hand up to say, yes, we'd like to take all the City of London jobs, but you've got other cities, even within Germany or beyond, that are also sort of trying to stake a claim on some of those. I think it's the classic case of it's too soon to tell. The negotiations on equivalence post sort of financial services passporting is only just begun. We've got many months yet to go for kind of negotiations of what financial services market is going to look like in the future. And I think it's one of those where probably 6 to 12 months time we will have a view on whether those stories or fears are going to come true. Yeah, it's just literally the negotiations have only recently started, so it's too hard to tell. But again, that's one of my point earlier on, is that actually the negotiations for a lot of things have only just begun.
Yeah, probably if I just pick up on something that's on the chat there from the lady from Switzerland, because I mean the Swiss obviously has a powerful financial services sector as well. But and is not in the EU, but it is in Schengen, so it has free movement of labour and so forth in Switzerland. But the Swiss have been negotiating for I think at least 10 years with the EU around 2 services frameworks, and I think the negotiations have been punctuated by regular fallouts and issues, and the EU occasionally unilaterally putting in rules and regulations to stop certain financial services products being sold. So it was been a pretty rocky road for the Swiss, I believe. So yeah, as James said, there's a lot of work to do. So it could get quite difficult based on that experience.
Okay, so we've talked a fair bit about the challenges, and Joe, I see your point. What do we think are the positives and the opportunities through Brexit? So Shiv, can I invite you in for your perspective on that first of all?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think Britain has far more flexibility, and we are seeing that in discussions. Whether it's a free trade agreement discussion, which they have more leeway to do. So that's point number one. Point number two is, around the world, I think this whole tech sector is cutting across all domains. And given the fact that Britain is very, very strong on services, and especially financial services, and I was quite curious to hear about the positioning of London and how we see that. From our perspective, we do our businesses with EU separately and with Britain separately. So there is not much movement of people from EU into Britain or vice versa for us. So relatively insulated, other than, as I said, we are going to curiously watch the developments on the passporting and equivalent standards, because that's going to impact the financial services business. But we also see the opportunity with Britain having to set up a fair amount of infrastructure around legal, regulatory, and many areas. So there is technology input in that. So there are going to be new opportunities which come into that from a tech industry perspective. So all of these do seem pretty attractive as an opportunity from an Indian tech industry perspective, if we are able to solve some of the small challenges, which I don't think so are deal breakers in any way or form. And we're seeing that we did as a part of the London Tech Week, which was held a few months back. We had about 50 plus companies from the tech industry participating in an 11-day event, and a lot of our companies have been relatively bullish about Britain. So, I do see that as a good sign, going forward. So, while we will continue to assess how things pan out, as mentioned by both Paul and James, and some of the key sticking points, and we do see that currently I don't see there are any big deal breakers. In fact, there are opportunities, and we'd love to see more on government procurement and some of the other things, how changes pan out on that field as well.
Okay, thank you. Marianne, you had your hand up. Would you like to jump on in?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I've actually got a question for the panel, please, if I may. Considering the opportunities we do have, do you believe that there is an appetite for the UK to really collaborate with maybe smaller countries like Norway or Switzerland to make a bigger impact, and kind of pull the forces together, share best practice, maybe learn from countries that have been outside the EU for a while and discuss the benefits, for example, being in the Schengen? So what's the panel's view on this, please?
I could give my view. I've kind of worked and lived in Switzerland quite a lot over the last 10 years. So I guess I see a lot of good things in Switzerland. Like, you have a fantastic railway system, which is part private owned and part public owned, but it works extremely well. So you kind of wonder why that model can't work in the UK, for example. But I think, and also to go back to the previous discussion, I think we just need to kind of think global. We're part of a global world still, and actually the opportunities are in that world. Some of them will be in Europe, but we need to look at, as you mentioned, other smaller countries and more globally as well. So I think it's it's kind of think global and kind of act local as well, because we'll see, there's a move to supply chains being nearer to home, etc. And we've also got the large kind of sustainability and kind of ethical agenda as well, which is another major force for change. So we need to be aware of that. So I kind of would badge it as lots of opportunity there, but think global and act local. So.
Absolutely. James, would you like to give your response?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that the two points that I'd sort of noted down, I think Paul just commented on. Yes, absolutely. We need to keep on trading with the EU. Clearly, it's a massive market for us, but actually, yes, there are opportunities outside of the EU borders, and learning some of those lessons from the likes of Norway, Switzerland, etc. I think would be great. Obviously, the likes of Canada and some of the Commonwealth countries, you would hope. The UK could have got maybe some kind of historical alliances with as well. It'd be easier to do business with some of those countries. But I also think, as Paul mentioned briefly there, is in terms of the local aspects as well. This may force us also to become more nationalistic buyers. If you look across the continent, the French are very nationalistic buyers. Everything is labelled with "Made in France" whenever you go to France. We don't seem to have that same consumer passion for where things are made and built. We love our German cars. We love our German supermarkets, for example. So actually, all of this may force us to become more nationalistic buyers. So actually, yes, let's look beyond. Let's look at Europe. Let's look beyond Europe. But actually, it is also a potential opportunity because of the bureaucracy that's going to be in place for UK businesses to actually do better within the UK as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. So looking at that, I know one of the issues a lot of UK companies had is, this is coming back into the EU piece, is the concern that goods were no longer going to be classed as made in the EU if they contained parts made in the UK. Is that a real concern for organisations, for companies?
Well, it certainly is for companies in the manufacturing sector. I think the limit is it 40% is the limit, I think, but clearly, you know, if the rules changed on that, it could have a massive impact on the current car industry in the UK and also future development of you know, electric cars and stuff like that. So, you know, and proving the provenance is obviously quite complicated and time consuming with lots of paperwork and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that that was agreed was a major boon for the manufacturing sector. You know, it was a kind of last minute agreement in the deal, wasn't it? So, yeah.
I think it's a sliding scale, isn't it, Paul? I think it's 60% for a while and then 40% at some point. But as you said, it's the things like motor manufacturing has clearly been the one that's in the press because the batteries and actually the UK just simply does not have a battery manufacturing capability on that scale at the moment. But I think even this morning they're talking about massive investment from Tata in massive sort of gig factory in the Midlands somewhere for exactly that. So I think that it also may force those sorts of rules may also force investment in the UK as well. So again, another potential positive spin-off. Maybe unintended, but nevertheless.
Okay, great. So obviously so much is still to be negotiated and decided. So what would be your top tips and advice to any of the delegates of what they should still be planning and preparing right now? So I'm going to ask you, James, and then Paul. Yeah,
I think clearly our clients, we tend to work with large multinational organisations, either headquartered in the UK or Europe, and we deal with IT outsourcing. So I think the recommendations kind of continue along the vein that we've been using for the last few years, and I think that's along the topics that we've already talked. It's around things like data protection, data processing, employment rights, things around financial side of things as well. Things like making sure that we're implementing things like local to local invoicing, protecting things like withholding tax, etc. And these are all things as an IT outsourcing profession and industry we're quite used to. UK obviously has got sterling, whereas we've got the euro across the EU, well, the majority of the EU, and therefore we've been dealing with these sorts of things for a number of years. So, as the thing I said in my introduction, it's not at the moment. It's not a huge change for us as an industry. Yes, there will be some changes, and making sure that we start implementing potentially different schedules, because as things start to diverge on things like data processing, there will be changes and there will be different annexes and things like that. But these are things that we've been doing as an industry for 20, 30 years already. And I think we just need to continue to do what we've been doing, but take on board those changes that have come into effect and will continue to change and come into effect over the years to come.
Okay, thank you.
If I just build on that, I mean, probably to pick up on one of Shivendra's points actually is around talent and people, because all people are going through a huge amount of difficult change at the moment, whether it's Brexit, COVID, economic fallout, mental health, etc. So you need to really be looking after your people today, because they're obviously key to success. As hopefully growth returns and we get back to something like normality sometime this year. But also, obviously, we need to think of the future. So people, we need to be all thinking about our recruitment policies. How do we, as Shivendra said, how we skill people up? Where do we find those people? I guess in the businesses we are in, we've always kind of looked to an international workforce. But I think because it's difficult to find the people we need just in the UK sometimes. But so yeah, I think more companies need to be creative in where they get their people from in the future as well, and make sure they are skilled up and rewarded appropriately. So. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, we are getting close to time, so I've got one question for you each to answer, and that is, obviously we are still negotiating. What would be on your wish list that you would like to see the government negotiate or change? So Shivendra, I'm going to come to you first. What is your Brexit wish list? That could be business, but it could also be personal.
Well, I would restrict it to business right now. I think we talked about talent as long as there is going to be a solution to the demand supply scenario as far as talent is concerned, that would position UK as a top destination to be doing business with. So that's point number one, which means that this whole points-based system, till the time you have local employees or local talent, this points-based system should integrate the ICT tier 2 visas, which the companies typically take. And include, some of the suggestions that we've made to the Home Office to streamline some of that. There should be a very structured approach by the British government to look at, working together with universities. And we as an industry are very, very happy to work with universities to try and see how we can work on upskilling, people and then hiring them, in the United Kingdom. I think large 4 or 5 companies typically hire about 30,000 plus employees, and we are seeing a lot of that happening. There is something called an immigration skill surcharge which companies pay, and I think we want it ring fenced, so that the amount which goes into the treasury doesn't go into a blind hole, but is used for upskilling. Then there is something called an apprenticeship levy. Again, there have been various submissions which have been made on that. We would like to see a solution on that. We'd also like to see a solution on social security agreement, signing of that between the two sides. And we are working with various regions in the UK to create a launch pad, for smaller and medium enterprises, low-cost launch pad for them to set up and then grow in the UK. And all of this, I think is very much possible, and with hopefully a free trade agreement starting to be discussed, we would like to have a technology element within that as well. So a few asks which we've already made to the British government, and we do raise it at any formal, submissions which are made either directly or through our government as well.
Okay, I think they're very good asks, and I back you on those, Shivendra. James, anything on your wish list?
No, I think Shivendra's captured almost all the points that we'd want on the wish list. The only thing that I'd sort of say above and beyond that is just to have that Dallas moment where I wake up in the shower and find it was all just a dream. But but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think Shivendra it summed up the points that I think would make hiring of talent a more frictionless light kind of deal as well, moving towards that is really what we'd be looking for.
Okay, thank you. And then the final word will come to you then, Paul.
Okay, let me just add a personal build. My daughter's just started university this year, actually, so she was due to be going on a year abroad in Germany, but the Erasmus scheme that allows that is not part of the deal, so it's been stopped. So my wish, if we are going to be a global player, is that we put in a scheme that's at least equivalent, so it gives young people the opportunity to experience the world and different cultures and spread the good news about GB PLC alongside.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that too. And not having to queue for hours at passport control would also be a personal wish from me. So very simple one.
I'd love to be in a queue at passport control because it means
right now. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so we're at time, so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers and thank our attendees for their contributions. Obviously, more than happy to continue the conversation via email or on LinkedIn, so please do get in touch. And yeah, let's hope that the wish list comes true. So yeah, stay safe, everybody, and apologies I'm not on video, but thank you very much for joining. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.